I grew up around sales and I was ready to make this move. I'm ready to shift. I mean, the publisher and I had this great rapport, and my boss said no. And I felt like I was an owned commodity.
Well, Jacqueline, I am so excited that we got a chance to do this. I know we had some back and forth scheduling most on me and my end, but I know we're both busy women and appreciate you taking the time, especially since you're traveling. Probably not going to be traveling by the time this airs, but I think it's really important for all of us in leadership to get to experience different cultures in the outside world. Have you been traveling a lot in your career? Is that something that you love to do?
I love to travel in my career, not necessarily into other places or other cities and towns or outside the United States, but I absolutely love seeing the world and seeing and experiencing different cultures, different foods, and as you travel, it's amazing what you experience. Like, you get to see the good, bad, and the ugly of companies that are, like, in the travel space. So I did a LinkedIn post about what happens, like, at 30,000 feet when you, like, have, like, a completely rude flight attendant. Like, it can change your trip for either the good or the bad, right? Depending upon people that you encounter, but that's also where leadership comes in. And so it was really quite fascinating, and I'll share the story really quickly. I was traveling with my son, we were going to visit, I live in Reno, Nevada, we were going to visit a school. He's, a rising senior, so we're looking at colleges, and we got in this airplane, and I'm sitting there, and I am talking to this woman who's, aisle next to me, and she saw that I had pretzels. Like, I had asked the flight attendant as I went by, she's like, "Oh, look, looking at pretzels, whatever." She's like, they didn't offer that to me." So she turned around and slightly tapped the flight attendant. Just like, I think she even said, "Excuse me," but she didn't hear anything. So she just, "Excuse me." The woman whipped around and screamed to her, like, "Do not touch me." It was shocking. And then on top of that, what was really fascinating was the flight attendant actually then, to the gentleman in front of me, touched his shoulder, touched the gentleman touched her she touched the gentleman's shoulder to say, "Excuse me, sir, would you like something?" And we were like, "Wait, wait."
It
And
worked.
it was just I mean, the comedy of it was that we obviously were laughing about it, but you just could not believe how rude and abrupt she was, and that was, like, one thing. And then another flight, again, traveling with my son, the gate agent was so incredibly abrupt that as I got on, I mean, and everybody commented on it, like, everybody, like, there was, like, this level of tension, and she just didn't have to be that way. But as we got on, I happened to say something, and I said something to the flight attendant that was there, and I said, "Well, yeah, the gate agent that, that's checking us all in, she needs, like, an attitude adjustment." The woman in front of me was carrying she had, her handbag and her carry-on luggage, and she had a medical bag. And the woman's like, "Let me see that medical bag." And just, like, totally just, like, went after this poor woman. I'm like, "Come on." Everything is in, you know, obviously it's all in the delivery, all in how you say things, all in your attitude. And so I got on the flight and I said something. I was joking when I said it, and the flight attendant, she's like, "Whoa, what happened?" I go, "Oh, your gate agent just I think she needs a few days. She needs a vacation or something." Like, she needs some time away.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's a great example of how we're all leaders, whether you have the title and you're managing people or not, and what you do in your role, where whatever role that is, can really seriously affect other people around you. And that's an unfortunate example of someone not being a great leader for the people that they're serving. And unfortunate that you all had to experience that too. But I do like that you found some of the humor in the first example. That that is a humorous moment. The
Yeah, you
irony.
have to find humor. You have to find humor in all of it, but at the same time, too, it really does. Just because you don't have a position, right? This is where I always say, like, be the person who does what is right, not just because it's your job to do it, just but you do it just because it's just the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Or you're taking a stance, or maybe you're at your company and somebody needs to step up to do something, or somebody's not feeling well and you step in. Or as the leader, you everybody hears about the whole George Washington story. He came up on some people, and one guy's sitting there on the riverbank, just sitting there and telling all of his troops to do the work, and George Washington gets in there and starts doing it, and it's like, you know, just put some time in, and if your team is struggling, help them. Like, you know,
You gotta roll up your sleeves and step
you
alongside.
gotta roll up your yeah,
Yeah,
have to
absolutely.
roll up your do the work, and don't just dictate, but find the way to work within the team because you're still part of the team.
Yeah. Well, you've been coaching teams for a long time now, and you've got a lot of great experience. Tell us a little bit about how you got to that place in your career. What's your trajectory been so that other people can understand how to navigate that for themselves? Because a lot of our audience, they're early in their career. Maybe they're looking at a leadership role and they want to know, how do I get to be that person like a George Washington who understands that leadership is rolling up your sleeves and working alongside your team?
So my trajectory is went kind of weird out, and I actually also actually did a post about this the other day. So my trajectory is it wasn't, I guess you could say, like a standard. Not everybody's trajectory is just straight up. There's always ups and downs, whatever. So I got out of college and I got into what I thought was like my dream career. It was magazine publishing, consumer marketing. Absolutely loved it. Wanted to be there. But what was missing in for me was actually great leadership. And so my very first company, I interviewed with this company. I will never forget. I was in college. You know, um, did hundreds of resumes and cover letters and did all these things to make myself stand out. And I got the job before I graduated. I'm like, yes, I'm employed. And I remember interviewing with this one woman, and I show up. Now, mind you, it's kind of a funny story about me showing up my first day at work. I was actually 2 hours late, but this is like before cell phones. It's a fuller story. But I walk in and I meet who I thought is going to be my boss, and she's not. She said, "Oh, meet this other woman." And I almost fell over because had I known that this person was going to be my boss, I would never have accepted the job.
Wow.
Like that it was like within a few minutes I could tell she did not know what she was doing. And she was not a person that I would have wanted to be my director, the person that's like, "Oh my god, this is my first job out of college." And ever since that moment, I didn't just I did have it in my head that I was, back then it was like if you want to switch jobs every 2 years to increase your pay to move up. And I was, magazine publishing, you didn't pay for it. So I was always looking for that next thing. But in my next thing, I was always looking for the right leader, mentor. So I was in magazine publishing for years, 10 years. 10 years. And it wasn't until I actually left the industry and started looking outside of that industry that kind of almost like kind of started to come into my own and started working at other companies and taking on different leadership roles. And so I found myself, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word, self-studying. They don't necessarily teach you great leadership skills in college, even though you could go to a great university like I went to. My major's in business, but they don't really talk about leadership. I mean, we had organizational behavior, but that's not leadership. So, I still think about that class. Anyway, but so I moved up, and I was and in my moving up, I also started to reflect on that first part of my career in magazine publishing and how I was as a manager, and I was horrible. I mean, I was downright I sucked. I mean, I was horrible. But it wasn't until got into these other roles where I actually was taking courses and participating in, somebody said, "Oh, there's going to be a course on coaching your team." I was in it. If there was a course on, there's something that was being offered, I jumped in. I remember I took Dale Carnegie, like I jumped in to those things. So I became the leader that I had wanted to be for my team. And I would say to anybody, like, this was like looking back, if you are somebody who's in that beginning stages, or you're wondering whether to step into leadership, or you're in a leadership position and you want to move up, the biggest thing that couple things that I could say is number one is if it's something that you want, pretend you already have it and act like you already have it. Like be that person and let your direct report, like the people that you're reporting to, let them know and let their reports know that what do you want, and ask them, like, specifically, if I want to get from here to here, what are the key things that you would recommend? And ask other people, like, get outside and ask people. Ask people in your company, ask people outside of your company, pick up the phone and ask. Use LinkedIn to get people's contact information, but pick up the phone and have conversations. Get out to networking events and meet other people who are in positions that you are looking to attain, and talk to them. Because in order for you to get there, you have to get the knowledge, but you really need to also let people know that's where you want to go.
Oh, yeah. That's great advice, Jacqueline. It makes a huge difference, and I've taken that advice in my career, and I think, what I've seen in other folks is almost a reticence to share that out loud, or they might not even know to do that. Like, you're sharing that as great practical advice for them too, and I love how you share about becoming the leader that you needed and wanted, and that's kind of my hope for all of us. I think
Oh,
we've all experienced that to some point. I mean, title is bad bosses, great leaders, and there's no judgment on the person who was the bad boss, but there are certainly bad boss behaviors that we had to grapple with and navigate as their reports and their employees or what have you. And so it can be quite challenging. And when you step into that leadership role, you often want to avoid what you experienced and become better, I hope. So, what's some of the bad boss behavior that you've experienced and would counsel other people to avoid? What would be like your top 3, maybe your top 5?
well, I think one of the first bad boss behaviors that when I think back to some of my bosses, number one is they never actually asked me where I wanted to go, right? And the companies, they never even shared their vision and mission, like for what they wanted, whether it's for the team or whether it was for, themselves. Like, so you didn't know what field you really were trying to play in. And then, but I would say one of the worst things for me was that I had a boss who truly held me back. So I was working at a publicly traded publishing company. I had expressed interest. I was sitting behind a desk. I was in consumer marketing, but something kept telling me that I should be going into sales. I should be doing something else. And I had had this conversation with the publisher and I said, I think I really want to try sales. Like I grew up around sales and I was ready to make this move. I'm ready to shift. I mean, the publisher and I had this great rapport, and my boss said no. And I felt like I was an owned commodity piece. And I remember thinking, but I don't want to be behind a desk. I'm getting like, this is not like, I like what I'm doing, but it was almost, how do I almost, it was almost too small of a position. I wanted something more and I wanted to get out and I felt like I just wasn't growing because he was a horrible boss. He just wasn't, I wasn't growing underneath his tutelage because there wasn't any. And so if you can imagine, I didn't last long. So that's the other key thing too, is that if you have somebody who holds you back like I had, and they make, let's just say, or you've expressed like you're not loving the company and you get a counter offer, like you go out and you get a new job, you get a new position and they counter and you take the counter. No, don't ever take the counter. You are not happy, basically. Like if you, most, you know, 80/20 rule, most people do not leave a company because of the money. They say that is, but most people leave a company because they're not happy. They don't feel that they are being supported. They don't feel like they're being heard. They don't feel like they're part of the team. I mean, they just don't feel like they're appreciated for what they're doing. And so don't ever take the counter. It's not worth it. You will be gone again in 6 months. It is statistical. Like ask ChatGPT if you want. Like for the stats, right? Ask them. But it's the truth, right? So, but that was like for me, that moment in time when my boss said no, I just remember feeling so upset because it was my opportunity to try something and somebody was giving me an opportunity that said, "Hey, Jacqueline, I believe in you. I want to give you this opportunity to try." And I may have failed. Who cares? But I was like, let me do that. And I'm like, how do I go get that next opportunity? Like I need, and so that to me was pretty, pretty bad. And then, on top of that, in that same area, like I remember I had a boss, like I had a position at a company, do not know what I did. I can tell you that I don't know what my position did. I was bored stiff. I was bored, like no direction, absolutely no direction.
Wow.
And I remember I remember, I don't know.
I don't blame you, especially if there's really no pretty direction. I'm not surprised because I've seen it, experienced it to a point too, where that boss or that authority figure tells you no and there's no clarity as to why. And I absolutely agree. You're right. You could have at least had the opportunity. And if you failed, then you failed. But it sounds like nobody had the conversation with you either of, well, we either don't have that position available, but here's what you could do instead, or how about we test it out and see? And it sounds like they didn't even make room for any kind of growth plan for you.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and the publisher was all for me joining the sales team. Totally was all for it. And yeah, so I was just like, I just remember like that whole experience was just so, and yeah, and so I think I was gone within 6 months. I had found a new position.
Well, you talk a lot about taking a leap. And so it's a good segue into that
Yeah.
because the thing you're describing is that idea, that understanding that if you're unhappy, if you're not in the right place, position, what have you, you need to take that leap. And that can be scary. So tell me, was that the biggest leap you've taken, or were there other bigger leaps?
So I've taken a lot. And it's funny, like for me, it was always anytime I've made a change, I personally have never been afraid of it. And I don't know I don't know where that comes from. I just know that like if I set my mind to something and I want to go ahead and try something out, I think it was like after that experience, I'm like, just don't ever not try. I remember I got married and I'm still with my husband, he's here. And we moved to from New York to Boston, and I had been in publishing, and somebody had said to me, "Oh, you should just go get a job at Clear Channel at the radio station in Boston." And I'm like, "Okay." So I did. I mean, it wasn't like I had an interview. Okay, so I tried it, and then there were some things that didn't happen the way that I thought they were, and so I pivoted again. And then that wasn't going the way I really wanted it to either, and so I pivoted again. And so, I think probably for the first like, our first 5 or 6 maybe years living back in Boston, because 'cause I'm from there, it was like, you know, "Jacqueline, what position or what company are you working with, this month?" You know what I mean? It was like but my so for me, the biggest thing is that I was I was searching for something, and I was searching for a company that was the right fit, and I knew that I if I liked a company and I learned about it, I mean, this is the key thing. I learned about the company and I knew what my position was. I could I could figure out what the position they were looking for, look at my skills, marry them together, and sell myself. And so, but the key thing was I had to like the company first. I mean, unfortunately, so many times you get into a company and it's not what it seems. So somebody would say, "Well, why what happened with, like, the first couple of companies?" Well, funny, very similar to the very first company that I ever worked for, is that I got hired for one thing, I was told I was doing one thing, and as soon as I walked through the door, they said, "Nope, you're gonna do this." And that's not what I joined. That's not what I joined, but I tried. I tried it.
Yeah.
And so that happened a few times. And so then I got I just said, "Oh, I'm gonna try recruiting, become a recruiter." And I loved recruiting. It was great because you get to help people. But it was a fun job. It was a fun position. I thought it was gonna be a great career. One of my a girl that I had met at the gym was working for the company, and I thought that she's like, "Oh, come be my partner." Great. I'll come be your partner in this. I get hired. No, we want you to start a division. I'm like, so the other thing I would say to somebody is like, this was like a lesson that I learned the hard way is, now three times the charm, like this happening. If you bring me on, make sure that you sign on the dotted line what your position is, what your title is, and what you're exactly going to be doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of these companies were small, not your big conglomerates. They were your small, like 1 to 25, although Clear Channel was a big company, but the office that I was working in was, maybe 50 people, not as formalized as something that would be like a bigger company, like a GE or Apple, Google, name the company, right? Like big, Fortune 1000 company, right? So if you're looking at a small company, that would be the biggest thing I would say to anybody to make sure what you're coming on for is exactly what you think.
That's great advice. And it ties in, Jacqueline, to what you were saying earlier. When you're looking for that next step in your career, go out, meet people, talk to people, which is exactly what you did. And then in that journey, it sounds like you had moments where you could have been stuck, and that's where you took the leap and you moved from one to the next so that you didn't get stuck. But I think you talk about this in other capacities, that idea of feeling stuck, and what are some ways that we can mitigate that situation and move ourselves forward, take that leap, especially when maybe folks don't have that sort of confidence and same kind of courage that you embody? What are some ways that we could tap into that?
I think one of the biggest things that I would say to anybody, if you have that feeling of stuck in like that pit in your stomach, like I just can't, like take yourself to some place where you can sit down, like be present with yourself. Maybe it's, you know, maybe it's in your house, someplace, sitting with a glass of wine, some music playing, or whatever it is, and write what you want. Like, you have to know what you want first. Like, and you have to know what your personal long-term dream vision is. And so once you can get that in your head, like if the place that you're in right now, you know, yes, you could make the list, like what's the good points, what are the bad points? But if it's not fulfilling you and it's not helping you and the people there are not lifting you up and supporting you, why stay where you are and keep that pit? Like, and ask yourself, is that what I want? Because I'm going to bet it doesn't. And so, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
Like, if you try something else, like, what is the worst that can happen? Oh, so it doesn't work. And then you try something else. But one of the biggest things is that know that you're not alone, right? And know that, when you're sitting down and figuring that out, and if you have that feeling of being stuck, write out what you want and then network, connect with people.
Mm.
You have to, networking is not just about getting a new job, it's learning about other people. And I'll share, when you talk with other people and what they're doing, sometimes you might uncover a position or a field that you never thought about. Like, never. There are thousands, thousands of ways to move up a corporate ladder or to do something different or to that, but you just have to talk to people. So, you know, and I always say, go to chamber events in your town, look at networking events, look at the fields that you're in, make those connections. Go and connect with people that are in a position that you think that you might, and talk to them. Most people will talk about what they're doing. They do want to help. And I'll share, like, I have a podcast, Unstoppable Leadership Spotlight, and I interviewed a gentleman. It's live. His name is Jim Fielding. He Okay, first of all, I almost fell over when he told me how he started and where he started. He started working at a clothing store, I think it was The Gap. I'm not going to show you his whole trajectory. You can listen to the podcast if you want, but he ended up as the president of Disney Retail in one
Wow.
of his positions, and he was folding clothes.
Wow.
And I like my mouth was like this, and he was talking. I'm like, huh? What did you do? Like, would never, you know, have thought
Yeah,
that was possible. But anything is possible if you want something and you want to take initiative. The key is taking initiative. Where do you want to go? And talk to people. Like, and that was the other one thing that he said. Like he is, I like somebody came into the store that he was in. I don't know, some blah, 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 whatever, and he happened to say something to that person, made an impression. Is it going to happen all the time? You can make things happen if you want.
that's great. That's what a powerful story too. It the the talking to people is in my mind also half listening and being ready, always being ready, and at the same time, it makes me wonder how can we be better at listening and communication? And I preface that with I hear a lot from other folks how schools and business schools especially aren't really training people in how to be great communicators in business. It's something we constantly have to practice being better at. My last guest that I was just interviewing, we were talking about ambiguity and how we assume people understand what our words mean, but if we don't translate and define them, then you leave a lot of room for error. And so if somebody is going out and having these conversations, what are some of the communication tools that they should have in their toolkit to have really strong, enriching conversations with folks and being able to listen and pick up on what you're saying is the opportunity that's out there?
First and foremost, I think listening is one of the hardest things. Like you have to practice being a listener, right? And not to the biggest thing is to be present in it and not know that there's that pause is okay and silence is okay. And that as somebody's speaking, you're not if you catch yourself, like, have something that you can think about. But if you catch yourself saying, oh, I want to ask this question, or I want to interject this after she's because I did this. No, no, no. Wait for the person to finish speaking. Like, wait, it's okay to wait. And as much as we always want to share our experiences, I always say, think of 5 questions that you can ask anybody. Let's say, and I always say, walking in, I share this with a lot of people, walking into a networking event. And let's just say you're standing there and we happen to be in a ballroom, hypothetically, right? I might say to you, okay, Rebecca, so tell me. I'm like, I'm Jacqueline. So do you ever go ballroom dancing? It starts a conversation. It's not about what the person does or who they're with. It's about the person. So if you can think of, and 5 questions that you can ask somebody about themselves before you ask them about what they do, you're going to learn a little bit about that person and you're going to make a deeper connection. And knowing that you can, again, and listening, it's hard. It is really hard. But listening and asking questions, you could have things prepared, but just be as curious as you can. And I know, and I have to be honest, when people say be curious, I'm like, curious about what? Like, what am I curious? Like, what is what does being curious even mean? But think about being like, so I always like to say, think about things that you might want to learn about this person that's sitting in front of you or standing in front of you. You know, do you like to do ballroom dancing? We're in a beautiful ballroom. Do you like to travel? I mean, I'm in a different country and we walked into this beautiful room and you're like, you all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, think about the parties that they must have had back in the 1500s here, whatever, like it just, so, you know, and, and I would also say is be
Mm,
open to receive and to ask, so many of us, we could stand with our arms closed, be open to receive and be open to, have that feeling of I'm open to hear and connect with people
yeah.
because that energy that you're bringing into the room, if you walk in with that openness, other people will feel it too.
Hmm.
And remember, everybody else is, if you're in a networking room with a bunch of people, not every, you could think that people know each other, but pretend that nobody knows each other and you're just going to walk up and say, "Hi, my name is."
It can be so hard, but you're right. If you're thinking of it in that way, to me, it's almost putting the energy on the other person and not worrying about yourself so much in the moment. And something you just said now about the energy makes me think of how, to me, it's very helpful if we go into a situation like that with no real agenda. Or I love prepping questions, like you said. I think that's very helpful. At the same time, it's not about taking from other people. It's what can I show up to give?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love
Right.
that you share that. It can be really daunting sometimes. I've certainly felt this. And in my career, a lot of what I've had to do is show up and present and be presentable
Mm.
and perform, and it can be very draining and taxing. And there's also the sort of underlying internal monologue of, well, who am I? I'm not good enough, and feeling that imposter syndrome. And I've actually found the more experience that one, at least in my experience, I can't say this is true for everyone, but I have found that the more experience I gain, the more of an imposter I feel. And, and you're like, wait, I thought I was supposed to build more confidence as I grow, but you realize I actually know less than what I think I do. So, is there anything that we can take from your knowledge and understanding of, like, how do I battle that imposter syndrome if I'm going into a room with other people and I'm putting the focus on them and I'm asking questions, but I'm still feeling like maybe I'm not enough, or what am I even doing here? Is there a way I can flip my mindset and mentality in that way, respect?
I think first of all is knowing that 90% of the people in that room have that same feeling.
Mm,
I mean, you hear from like great CEOs that, as you just said, as you gain more knowledge, they still feel like they're an imposter. They've got the imposter syndrome. But I think one of the biggest things is you are who you are, and so you can never be an imposter. You're not necessarily faking who you are. And to be curious about somebody else and asking questions, that's where the like finding out like real information is. So you're not faking learning about being curious about somebody. I really want to know. I want to really know about these people. And there's nothing fake about that.
great.
And I was going to say the other thing is that I was thinking about this as because you were talking about some of the people that are listening. If you're in college or you're in that first job and you still want to talk to people, the more you can be curious about the other people. How long have you been in the workforce? Don't even ask them what they do. Like, how long have you been working? Do you like it? If you could, is there anything you would change? Like, think of questions that have nothing to do, and the person, then you're going to learn about the person. You could even say, like, I've been living here. Was your first job right in the area that in the same town or the city or state that you went to college in? Think of questions that you can ask people before you start asking them about their positions.
Mm, that's great. Great way to approach that. Otherwise, it can be a little too transactional, perhaps. Yeah, it
Right.
feels more relational if you are curious about them as a person and not simply what they do, and realize that doesn't define who we are either. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Jacqueline, we could continue on this conversation. I know it's nighttime where you are of your time, but I wanna make sure we continue the conversation
Yeah.
outside of this. You have a podcast, you've also got a wonderful business. How can people connect with you and find you online?
The best thing to do is go to my website, leaptoyoursuccess.com. You can connect with me there. There is a whole vision mission workbook that I have, so download that. It's free. And then find me on all the socials, but I'm really on LinkedIn a lot. And listen to my podcast, Unstoppable Leadership Spotlight. I've got a couple of had some really amazing guests. If you've ever listened to or read any of the Go Giver series, Bob Berg was just on, so his episode's coming out. And he wrote another book with Jeff West called Streetwise to Saleswise. So Jeff West was on the podcast. So take a listen to the podcast.
I love it. Definitely, Jacqueline, we'll definitely have the link below. I love sharing what everybody else is doing, and I hope our audience listening will hop on over to your website and take in all of your extra wisdom and knowledge, and hopefully reach out and work with you too. So thank you so much for being here. I hope that you'll continue the conversation. Maybe we'll hop on again and do another episode, because I know there's just so much more we could chat about, but this has been so valuable and practical. So thank you. And thank you to our listeners of the Bad Bosses Great Leaders podcast. We'll see you for the next one.
Thank you.